Okay, time for yin yoga. Today we'll start seated. I'm going to turn to face you because I'm going to take a wide-legged straddle. You're welcome to do that too, but it really just depends on what kind of a surface you're on. The harder the surface, the more you'll want to turn toward the side of the mat. If you're on a soft surface, then it probably doesn't matter. So from here, we'll start with half butterfly today. So you come into a wide-legged straddle, not as wide as you can possibly go. Grab onto the back of the right thigh, bring the foot in, and you're trying to get the foot to be in the center of the body, not over toward the other leg. So it's half butterfly. Full butterfly is this. So think about it that way. Where would this foot be? And then you can extend that leg. If you want, you can prop the hips up on a block, a bolster, a blanket. If you feel fine sitting on the ground, that's great. You want to listen to the lower back. That's what the thing is. So if the lower back's rounding when you sit down on the ground, if you bring the hips up, it'll help you sit up taller and keep that length in the spine. So that's the difference. And there's so many different heights you can do that with. So from here, we'll just start to go straight forward over the legs. We're not going to the side, just go straight forward. I like to use blocks underneath my forearms as an armrest, but you could build something so that you can rest the forehead and rest the hands down on the mat. We're just starting out, so you want this to be really gentle. We'll stay in the hips for quite a while. So don't feel like you have to go all the way into any of these poses, but especially this one. As we're starting out, take a deeper breath in through the nose. Back out through the mouth, nice and slow. Deep breath comes in through the nose, filling all the way up. Slow breath back out through the nose. Keep going with this, in and out through the nose, up and down the back of the throat. Listening to the sound of your own breath, almost like a ha sound, as if you were fogging up a mirror. And this is a sound that's always available to you, as long as you're not in too loud of a space. It's nice to have sounds that we can make ourselves that bring us comfort and that we find soothing. And your breath is always a tool to calm yourself down. And we'll bring ourselves back up to seated. If you have anything in front of you, set it off to the side. Bring the hands back behind you, soles of the feet to the mat wide, knees side to side, shaking that off with some windshield wipers. You'll come back to your wide-legged straddle, not as wide as you can go. This time, left foot comes in. trying to get the foot center of the body. It's okay if it moves away from you, if that helps you get it more toward the center. And you can always use, I forgot to tell you this on the first slide, you can always use a block or something to prop up this knee, especially if there's any trauma in the left knee. And then when you're ready, grabbing whatever you need in front of you to start to fold forward, straight forward, leave the legs the way that they are. Keep it gentle like you did on the first side. Just go part of the way in and come back to your breath. You really don't have anything else to do. So focusing on the breath is a nice way to keep your mind on your mat, in your body. Staying present for your practice. We'll come back up to seated. Set the blocks off to the side. Lean back onto the hands, soles of the feet wide on the mat, knees side to side, windshield wipers. And we'll stay in the hips and lower body for the next couple of poses. Each one will get a little bit deeper, but we're still staying gentle with ourselves. So this next pose is square pose. It's a cross-legged seat. So you'll just cross one shin in front of the other. You can still stay propped up on the hip or have the hips set up on something. So if you're already like that, just stay there. That's good. So when we look at square pose, you want the feet forward. What I see a lot of the times is feet are way back behind the knees. Bring the feet forward so it's like the ankles are underneath the knees, but still keeping both feet on the mat. And you can shift side to side a couple of times so that you feel even. You're trying to cross mid-shin, but that's a lot of hip flexibility. So if it's more like crossing at the ankles, that's fine. Maybe have blocks or something nearby so you can rest the head or the hands. Hands come back behind you to start. Lift the chest, sit up tall, maybe close the eyes, and you're trying to work those knees down toward the mat, keeping the hips down to the mat. So maybe you stay here, especially if this is enough for your hips, Or you could start to walk the hands forward and fold forward, now putting more weight on the hip opening. So being gentle with yourself, seeing where you can sustain the pose for a longer hold that feels easy in your body. It's the length of time that we spend in the hold that builds the intensity, not finding yourself deeper into the pose from the beginning. Close the eyes, start to bring yourself into the shape, into the mental state that you need to be in to find some comfort while you're here. Listen to the sound of your own breath. We'll bring the head back up, coming back to seated. Make sure you have enough room to bring the hands. Oh, remember which shin is in front. So just look, take a peek. It's usually the way you always sit. Bring the hands back behind you, separate the feet, bring the knees side to side, coming back to your windshield wipers. And you'll come back to seated with the other shin in front. So the other way with the cross-legged seat, shifting side to side, get those feet forward so the ankles are more underneath the knees. The front shin, that ankle is not going to be in front of the knee, it'll be ahead of it. And then try to cross at mid shin, making it a little bit tighter, or whatever your version of that is. Okay, bring the hands back behind you, sit up tall, close the eyes. Feel the knees going closer to the mat. So you feel that lengthening of the inner thigh, groin area, and then start to walk the hands forward. If you want more, folding forward, and you might need to adjust the blocks in a different way. Maybe you find them to be more supportive on a different height or supporting a different area of the body, arms, forehead, hips. And bring yourself back up slowly. Props go off to the side. Bring the hands back behind you. Separate the feet wide. Knees go side to side. So back into those windshield wipers, but we will take this a little bit deeper. So make sure everything's out of the way. Just go to side a few times. And next time the knees end up all the way over to the right, stay there. Let the knees come down toward the mat, coming into a version of deer pose, 90-90. That left hand can come forward between the legs, and you can start to position the chest so that it's pointing toward that right knee. Sitting upright, trying to get the outer right knee and inner left knee down toward the ground. And if you're leaning over to the right, that's totally fine. But you're trying to be as centered as possible, wherever that is for you. Keeping the chest lifted. Using this as a counter pose, a rebound from the last couple shapes we were in before we continue on. And you'll bring that left hand back behind you, bring the knees back to center. You can go side to side a couple of times, doing some windshield wipers before we transition over to the other side. Once you've gone a few times, when both knees end up over to the left, leave them there. Start to work the knees down toward the mat. Hands still back behind you. And then when you feel like you have a nice opening starting to happen, maybe the right hand comes forward. You're welcome to stay reclined if you want. Sitting up tall, chest is going straight forward over the left knee, or maybe you're leaning over to the left. That's fine too. Finding a place where you can just be in the pose, keeping the spine long, maybe eyes closed. Hands are there for support. So wherever you are, keep the hands or fingertips down on the mat or blocks so you can keep that length in the spine and the chest lifted. Outer left knee, inner right knee, both working down toward the mat at the same time. And the right hand will come back behind you, knees up, and then side to side again, keeping those feet wide. So now we'll come to hands and knees, but you'll probably want your bolster or something like it. So grab that, just bring it in front of you, and it'll go about midway, center of the mat, wide way in front of you. So bring the hands down in front of the bolster, knees down behind the bolster. Have the blocks within reach. Mine are at the top right-hand side of the mat. You might want those. Bring the hands forward so they're ahead of the shoulders. Tuck the toes, lift the hips up and back. Coming into downward facing dog is a transition. This isn't a pose. We're just using it to get to where we're going. Right leg lifts up and back. Bring that right shin ahead of the bolster. Right knee goes out to the right. And then you start to shimmy a little bit so you can get the hips even on the bolster. Top of that left foot comes down. And the farther forward the right foot is, the more intense this is. So feel free to bring it close to the bolster, because we want to keep this easy. And you want to feel like the hips are side by side and one isn't higher than the other. And that's what the prop underneath the hips allows you to do. So from here, you can start to come down using blocks if you want to, underneath the head, the chest, wherever you want, or maybe you just come down to the forearms, see how that is. Maybe you rest the head down, closing the eyes. We've been working up toward the single pigeon. Some people start to feel some noise in that right knee. If that's you, that's a cue to come out of the shape. Or if there's any other struggle that's starting to happen, come out of it. And the way if you're in it and it feels good, stay there. I'm just going to talk to the people that are struggling a little bit. So you'll come back up onto the hands, tuck the left toes back behind you, come back to downward facing dog, and we'll just skip single pigeon. It's not a big deal. You set the bolster off to the side, come down onto your back, soles of the feet to the mat, and you'll cross the right ankle on top of the left thigh. And you can keep the left foot down on the mat. You can bring the legs in, grab onto the back of the left thigh or top of the shin, keeping this foot that you can see, the right foot, flexed. And this is thread the needle. It's the same hip opening. So both are great. And then you'll just switch sides when we switch sides in single pigeon. And sometimes you can do single pigeon on one side of the body, but not the other. So that's fine too. That's your alternative, is thread the needle on your back, which is just as relaxing. You'll start to come out of this shape wherever you are. If you're in single pigeon, lift the head, work your way back up onto the hands, taking your time. You'll tuck the back toes, lift the back knee, come back to downward facing dog. And you can use this pose as a counter pose. So you can pedal out the feet. You can move that right leg around, which some people like to do, only if it's not too much effort, to get the circulation back. If you're on your back, switch side with thread the needle, doing the other leg. If you're in downward facing dog, lift the left leg up and back, bring that left shin ahead of the bolster, setting it down onto the mat, and then find even on the hips. So for me, I'm scooting the hips back. I'm tucking those right toes until I find even support underneath the hips. And then maybe you start to come down a little lower, eventually resting the head so that you touch the forehead down on something. Could be a block, blanket, whatever you have. Maybe it's the hands or the mat. You start to settle in on this side. And one other thing I'll point out about single pigeon, the placement of the left knee on this side is important. So if it's to the left of the torso, you're getting a deeper hip opening. If it's more underneath the chest, you can stay there if you find comfort there, but you may get a better you'll definitely get a better hip opening if you're on your back doing thread the needle. So that's something to consider. If not this time, maybe next time. And thread the needles always the option if single pigeon isn't working. It's one of our safer hip openings for the knees. We'll start to lift the head. If you're forward in single pigeon, working your way up onto your hands, lifting the head and the chest, tuck those right toes underneath you, lifting the knee, and then bring yourself back to downward facing dog, finding some movement, getting the circulation back into that left leg, maybe pedaling out the feet or moving that left leg around, however feels natural. If you're on your back, you can stay there with the feet on the mat. And if you're in downward facing dog, bring the knees back down to the mat, set the bolster off to the side, coming to seated on the mat. So once you come to seated, you'll want to strap for this next pose. So grab your strap, you'll come down. That's all you'll need to unroll it if it's rolled. Come on down onto your back. And I'll give you an option if you don't have a strap. So if you do have a strap, loop the sole of the right foot in the strap, placing the strap at the top of the arch, just below the ball of the foot, and you can slide the hands all the way back so the elbows rest. Left leg could go out in front of you if you feel like the lower back's okay with that. If you don't have a strap, then interlace, bring the right knee in toward the chest, interlace the fingers behind the right thigh and extend the leg up. And it's the same thing. You get that leverage of the fingers interlaced so that you can let the leg rest with the foot up, and maybe the left leg goes out in front of you. So we've had the legs bent for quite a while. Let's get some length here and also reverse the blood flow in the legs at the same time. If you have the left leg extended out in front of you, start to slide that left foot to the mat. If you're using the strap, bring the left foot up into the strap, set the right foot down on the mat, place the strap where you had it on the first side. And if you're interlacing the fingers behind the thigh, let that go, bring the left knee in toward the chest, start to extend that left leg up. So same thing, other side. Once you find where you want that left leg to be, toes coming down toward the face, heel going up, consider extending that right leg forward. See how it feels on this side. If it feels good, stay there. If it doesn't, walk the foot back in. But you've already opened up that leg, so the right leg should feel longer. Maybe close the eyes since you're on your back and focus on your breath. You'll start to hug that left knee in toward the chest, releasing the strap. Bring both knees in toward the chest. You can rock side to side and set the feet down onto the mat. Roll over to your right side. Use the left hand to bring yourself up to seated. This will take supported bridge, so you'll want something for support, a block, maybe 2 blocks. You could even use a bolster if you want to keep it lower. So once you have the blocks near this side, come side of the hips, come down onto the mat again, lying down on your back, walk the feet in toward the body, press into the feet, lift the hips up, find an appropriate height for the block. So maybe just see where the hips naturally want to lift and then fill that gap with the height of the block that makes the most sense. So maybe medium height, could be the tallest height, although you'd have to come up to the balls of the feet to lift the heels, turn the block so it's on the tallest height and stay there. So chest lifts, shoulders come underneath you a little bit, arms down by the sides. And then if you're gazing anywhere, you're looking up, and then you can decide if you'd like to close the eyes. So chin away from the chest. And what's nice about having the hips propped up on a block is you still get an opening in the front side of the pelvis. And we just opened up the legs, so it might be a little easier to get the thighs longer. And we're definitely staying still with the feet on the mat. So some of you like to extend the legs forward. Try to avoid that for now. This is our very first back bend, and that's taking the back bend even deeper. So even though your body can do that, we want to be gentle with it and not force it into such a big shape until it starts to become ready and open for that. So you've been in your back bend for a couple of minutes already. If you'd like to extend the legs forward and see about deepening the back bend, you're welcome to. Heels stay on the mat, chest is still lifted. If the legs are out in front of you, start to walk the feet back in, coming back to your supported bridge. And then lift the hips, press into the feet. If you're all the way up, you'll need to lift the heels too. Set the hips back down onto the mat. And then as our counter pose, uh, hook the feet, lifting the knees, grab onto the knees. So one foot on top of the other, and you can rock side to side. So you're just feeling the lower back spread with the shape of the legs. We're trying to avoid hugging the knees all the way in toward the chest because that's the exact opposite of what you just did. And again, the spine needs a little bit of time to readjust. Hook the feet the other way, so the other foot on top. Still rocking side to side if that feels good in your body. And set the feet back down onto the mat. Roll over to your right side. Use the left hand to bring yourself up to seated. You'll need to collect your blocks, maybe your bolster. We're coming to child's pose. You can do child's pose without any props the way you typically would, arms out in front of you, but I'll show you a version with props if you have them. So 2 blocks, lowest height, the narrow way at the top of the mat, about shoulder width distance apart. Bolster or whatever you're using can come behind the knees. So you want to wedge that bolster as far up as you can. And then tops of the feet come down, big toes together. If you can sit back so that the hips touch the bolster, great. If your hips are up high, it still feels good to have a bolster underneath you because the hips will slowly start to come down closer to the bolster and it might give you something to sit on. If you can sit on the bolster, then great. You might need to adjust a little bit, but arms come up, hands come up onto the blocks and forehead comes down to the mat. So we're getting into the shoulders. If it's too intense to keep the hands on the blocks, skip it. You could just bring the hands to the mat. So child's pose, still in a bit of a back bend here. With the upper body, it's definitely lighter than what we were just doing. And with the hands lifted up on the blocks, it opens up the upper back, shoulders. You want to make sure that the knees aren't so far apart that the thighs aren't supporting the torso. So torso's not going between the legs. You want it, the sides of the rib cage, to be resting on the thighs. And you could even have knees and feet all the way together if you're feeling any tenderness in the lower back, especially. You'll start to lift the head up one hand at a time, back down to the mat, shift forward to hands and knees. If you have the bolster behind the legs, set that off to the side and bring the blocks so that they're on the side of the mat. You'll come to seated, so blocks near the hips. And you'll come to lying down on your back. And we'll come into a twist. So you'll scoot the hips over to the left, knees come, scoot the hips over to the right, knees come over to the left. You could take a block between the knees, especially if there's anything going on in the lower back. It just gives the lower back more space. You could put a bolster or a blanket between the knees too. Right arm reaches out to the side and you fall into your twist. Left hand usually rests on the body somewhere. I'll leave that to you. You'll start to find your way back to center. If you have something between the knees, set it off to the side, come onto your back, bring the knees in toward the chest, hang onto the knees, keeping the knees and the feet together. Take some circles with the knees, feeling the hips move around underneath you on the mat. And then switch the direction, go the other way with your circles. Soles of the feet come back down to the mat. Scoot the hips over to the left. Knees come to the right this time. If you like something between the knees, try that. Left arm reaches back behind you. Head still resting down, but you could be moving the gaze over the left arm with the eyes closed if you like. Just a reclined spinal twist. You'll start to make your way onto your back again. If you have anything between the knees, set it off to the side. Once you find your way onto your back, soles of the feet to the mat, bring the knees in toward the chest, take those circles, maybe starting in the opposite direction. There's always one way you want to start. Maybe you go the other way if you can figure that out. And switch the direction. Set the feet back down onto the mat. Roll over to your right side. Use the left hand to bring yourself up. We're setting up for Shavasana. So if you have 2 blocks, bring 2 blocks, the lowest height, the wide way toward the top of the mat. So you're making one long wide block. If you have a blanket, that could definitely add another layer of comfort. You can take the blanket and put it on top of the blocks for just a little bit more padding. You don't have to have a pillow, but if you want one and you have a bolster, May as well use it. Feet are coming up on top of the blocks with or without the blanket. So your legs are elevated and so are the feet. And then you'll come down onto your back. If you have a pillow, great. If this isn't an easy one to nail, you want those legs to be long. And then once you get them long and they're not bent, just the heels, maybe the lower leg supported with the blanket and the blocks, you can let the toes turn out, arms come down by the sides. If you're touching anything else that's not part of the pose, scoot that out of the way. Shavasana. Let the breath control go. Body goes back to breathing on its own. And see where you can ease up physically with the pose. So make sure the fingers are curling because you're not using the hands. They're totally relaxed. Jaws heavy. Tip of the tongue is relaxed all the way down through the base of the throat. Start to wiggle the fingers and the toes. Walk the feet in so the feet come to the mat, bending the knees. Roll over to your right side, keeping the head on the pillow. Use the left hand to bring yourself up to your cross-legged seat, whatever your meditation seat looks like. Sitting up tall, eyes closed, feeling all that length that you can easily find in the spine now that you've moved it in every direction. Bring the hands together in front of you, keeping the lift of the chest. Start to bow the head, taking a moment to honor and acknowledge that heart and spirit, as well as everyone around you. Bring the head back up, blink open the eyes. Namaste. Thanks so much. That was definitely a full body yin class. We spent some time on the lower body, but also got into the spine with those back bends, shoulders, and some twists. So hopefully you feel open and ready for whatever the rest of the day or evening has in store. I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining.